figured I would do a little bit of a historic moment here with the elections. I think this is an important one. I'm probably clearly not the most relevant person to say that, as I'm not from the USA and I can't vote there. But I do believe that the USA has been one of the best in terms of leading with freedom and a driver, as those who do well are rewarded for their hard work. Now, capitalism has many downsides as well, but rewarding people for what they're good at is an extremely powerful way to get what everyone wants out of life. I think show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome is a really, really important quote to understand. So although capitalism has a lot of downsides, it's done very well for us so far. Now, I wanted to kind of share my thoughts around the US election. I hadn't really done it before. So this is kind of where we're currently sitting at the moment. Trump has 19 of the electoral votes. Harris has 3. 891,000 votes for Trump, 613,000 votes for Kamala. I guess depending on which county she was visiting, she would pronounce it differently herself, because she seems to be a chameleon of folk. I'm not necessarily sure she knows where she's from anymore either. The reason why I think it's so important, because generally the elections don't seem to mean a whole lot. And they haven't maybe for quite some time. You know, for those of you that are really into the whole conspiracy hypothesis, which is a pretty decent one, I think. Someone's been manipulating the government there through backdoors and channels of large sums of money and blackmail for a very long time, longer than I have been alive, which would lead many people to think, well, one puppet, just another puppet. But we have to remember, Trump was very unique. You know, this is one of the first people that said, hey, guess what? You know what we're not going to do? Have a war this presidential cycle. And that was actually very rare. I don't think we had a sitting president not go to war in some 20 plus years. You know, it was just such a strange, to see the Democrats root for war is just so profoundly disturbing to me. You know, as a non-American citizen, I always looked up to the USA for some of the things that they wrote into their Constitution. Now, we have a Bill of Rights in Canada, and many countries have their own version of the Constitution, but these are really important documents to try to help us found something which is important, which means I need to be able to talk shit, and so do you. And we need to be able to have clear and present arguments at scale with as many people as possible, because that's how we come to the best outcome. Our truth-finding markers come from arguments, basically. So it's a super important function that they, wrote into the sequence, saying everybody needs a place to argue with one another, because that's how we get the best outcome. Most businesses actually fail at this. Most businesses would rather root out argument and keep things even keel and go, no, it's fine, let's not have any big arguments. But real truth is found from great arguments and great debate. Even the Buddhist mantra, this one, if you look into Buddhist scripture, he says very specifically, this is the mudra of the great argument or the great debate, which means we should always be having philosophical disagreements about what the truth might actually be. Because if you're just told what the truth is and you have to believe it, you're losing not just sovereignty of your country potentially, but of yourself. And that's a real downfall. Now, whether you're in the US or not, you might not think this is a big deal, but there are very few countries who have done this correctly. There are other countries who have a lot of great things going on, like Dubai and Singapore, but they're not free countries. There's a lot of things you can get into a lot of trouble there for, but they're actually doing a better job in the US right now, because they take things that should be illegal, like assault and theft, as a very important part of their fabric of society, which used to be the case in the United States. So there's definitely a need for a rule of law, but people are really good at self-governing too. I had an experience yesterday riding my bike through Bali and just seeing how people would naturally kind of ebb and flow with traffic to take over. And you don't need a rule of law. Like, people are generally pretty damn good at governing themselves if you give the ability for them to themselves to administer justice. Now, in the bike riding scenario, the justice is if you suck at riding, you're going to get hurt sooner than later, and you're probably going to hurt someone else sooner than later, which is a negative consequence which will affect you specifically and that someone else, because a bike is a highly dangerous thing to be to be riding on. So anyways, there's a lot of clear evidence that humans do naturally self-organize. They don't need a whole lot of government to actually do well. But a society is based off many other things too, not just its democratic or republican beliefs, but its religious beliefs. Here in Bali, it's Hindu. You know, women go out every morning and light incense and give them to the gods and lay them on the street. And because of that, you just have a gentler, more beautiful society, because they're taking time out to give reverence to everything that exists, which is a really beautiful thing. So it's not always just written into the fabric of law, it's written into the fabric of their society, which doesn't necessarily have to be a rule by presidential decree. It can just be, this is what we believe is to be good for us, you know, so we're going to go out and kind of make these little prayers every day to, you know, to have a better life, to have a safer place for our kids to play. And just that thought itself actually creates those experiences, because the whole society can agree on something. So religion used to take the context of government and actually did a pretty damn good job for many things, because that moral quality was written into their daily practices. Now, most people just believe that their daily practices can override whatever nonsense they're doing, and they go, oh, this is where you get dogma from, which is, I just believe in God and that should be enough, which is not the case. You need to do a lot of work, you need to ask a lot of questions, and then you'll get better results. So anyways, we're just watching the live updates here for the presidential elections. You've got Trump now at 19, Harris at 3, with 3 million votes for Trump and 2 million votes for Harris, roughly speaking. That's 52.9% for Trump, 46.3% for Harris. Now, I saw earlier that the record numbers of men were going out to vote, apparently, because only apparently 9% of men vote. Maybe we just all think it's been rigged for so long, it's not even worth going out and doing. But again, the reason why I think this is important is under Trump, previously, there was no wars. Like, that alone should just signal such a huge hallmark to anyone that, you know, Trump's not a bad guy. Like, I don't know how you could call someone a Nazi who, in fact, just didn't go to war. Like, what are you talking about? Like, Hitler was a really bad guy. When apparently went to war and like killed a bunch of people, but that's not what we saw with Trump. You know, like, we have this devil that we kind of already know. And the authenticity that it brings to the table, I think, is just extremely tantalizing to most people. Yeah, it's like grabbing by the pussy. Yeah, sure, why not? I know a bunch of guy friends who would say that. It's kind of funny. Trump is hilarious. Whereas Kamala is just a stupid, brain dead, like total air case when it comes to having a conversation. You know, the fact that she didn't go on Joe Rogan is a huge, huge, huge mistake, but it would have been even a bigger mistake to actually go on, because then it would have been proof that this woman has no clue what she's talking about, even when it comes to just her own life. And that's kind of ridiculous. You know, if you're the vice president, you should have a whole bunch of news stories that are constantly accumulating and going over on a daily basis that you can share and take new data from. Like, I know I do. I could reflect just this last 2 weeks about unique things that have happened, and I can branch out into stories for hours on just those small little intricate details of something that I find interesting. So, you know, I've always been baffled by people that are voting for Kamala, because I've got friends that are like, Kamala's the only place, like, Trump's a fucking evil man. It's like, and I don't think that they're doing, and these are well studied, well-founded people. And I've noticed the same thing happen with the vaccine as well, is that you just get caught in this ideological belief center, which is, oh, I must trust the science, instead of actually doing your own goddamn research and homework. If you're not, I mean, Jimmy Dore made a great joke about this. Like, you know, remember when doing your own research was called reading a book? You know, it's a pretty ridiculous thing. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of chart today's presidential election is because I think it's very important. I think if Trump wins, we're going to run into a bull market very quickly. If he brings the team of people that he's been looking at to the table, you know, they're going to do really well. It just makes sense to me. Gold's going to do well, Bitcoin's going to do well, the stock market's going to do well, because the government's going to inherently have the same problem, which is they need to print more money. Now, if he brings in Elon and they get rid of a bunch of government overreach and overspend, you could have the largest fucking bull market in goddamn history come to fruition, because the United States has an extraordinary pool of talent, and if they were to remove regulation, you could have like a wildfire of all of this dry brush of new things that have been waiting to happen. If they reduced income tax to zero, which would be a brilliant idea, you would have the talent pool all rush back to the United States. If you reduced capital gains tax, you'd have some of the world's wealthiest people bring all of their money back to the United States and actually start to build something fucking productive. Because the government at this point, taking that large group of taxes to do something that's totally fucking useless, is basically like a script right to unfunctionality. You know, so if it's a big if Trump gets elected and does XYZ with people like Kennedy or RFK Jr. and Trump or and Elon Musk, you could see the largest bull market in US history, because they're still going to have to print money. That's not going to change. But if the capital, both financial and intellect, comes rushing back to the United States because of reduction of regulation and a reduction of taxes on the people who are productive members of society, oh my God, it would be fucking glorious. Anyways, I'm swearing a lot because I'm super excited. I hope that's the case, because it would mean we would see a bull market similar to the early roaring 20s, where we just innovation, capital is just leapfrogging one another. There are very few countries who are in the right place if they reduce the regulations and they open up room for more capital come flooding back to the United States, that place would be the center point of some of the greatest technological change we've seen in the last 50 years again. So I'm quite excited about that. Again, I'm rooting for Trump, even though I can't vote in any of this. I can at the very least kind of foresee what I think the future is going to look like based off this particular sentiment. So there we have it. You know, Trump now at 19 electoral votes, 2.9 million at 53%, and Mrs. Harris at 45.7. How did this woman even end up in that position with no primary election? Like, it just seems like such a scam. You know, it's just like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like push this girl in, skip preliminaries. No one actually gets to vote for her, but now you have to vote for her because you thought you were gonna be voting for Joe Biden, but now it's just this person. Like, what the heck even happened? Like, that seems so far from democracy or like any type of voting regularity to me. It's just madness. People are madness. Anyways, let's take a look at the charts, see how everything's doing in the world of crypto. So we've been following this super big ass. Well, first off, let's go to this larger chart. This, I believe we are in a giant cup and handle. I've gone over this before. Most people always get this wrong because they assume cup and handles happen on small time frames. A good cup and handle should have at least 2 to 5 years inside of it. If we look at gold's cup and handle, I think, which is the perfect example of something that's extremely relevant and almost identical in its chart format. Once we got out of the SOS and backup phase for the cup and handle here, it was an extraordinary move in a very, very short period of time. So this SOS and backup phase, once you start to break out of that, boom, it's just straight up. And this is generally what I like to do. I like to wait for the confirmations either from the bottom of the range or at this secondary moment from the top of the range, depending on where you join in the market cycle. So with Bitcoin here, we're at the top of this secondary range now, right? So I screamed go long here, literally everything in October, and that was correct. Now that we've had this nice accumulation range take place, I think we're about to see that final breakout and just basically go straight up here. And this is going to be regardless of who wins. It doesn't matter who wins the elections right now, we're going to go straight up because both government appointees are going to have the same problem at hand, which is they need to print more capital. Now, the bull market under Trump, I think will be, but it could be if the things I said he actually puts into place goes in to remove a bunch of government inefficiencies and reduces taxes for the productive class, then you're going to have the greatest bull market in fucking all of the US history. It'll be phenomenal. If we don't, we're still going to have a decent bull market because they're still going to print money, but it's going to go into government overreach. It's going to go into censorship. It's going to go into all the places that you don't want. You're going to have a massive stub of innovation. And then I truly believe we're at war, and we're at a war that you don't understand. As a matter of fact, we probably entered the war in March of 2020, but most people are just not smart enough to see it, because this is a subversive war designed to kill as many people as possible without ever a gunshot once being fired. And that could be prior to being born or in there. Across the board, if you follow my private newsletter, you know all the updates we've done about mortality, drop of birth rates, all these disastrous things. But one of the things it allows them to do, and one of the things I was a little bit confused about, is if more people are dying and less people are being born, there's less demand on the regular consumer product indexes. Now, there's still demand for assets because they're going to print a ton of dollars. So the asset prices are going to fly, but the consumer price inflation won't fly because the demand of the average person is actually diminishing. There's less people to buy houses, to buy food, to have that extra capital roll through. So where I originally thought hyperinflation would come because you have more people, you need more capital first, and you kind of need them both to grow together. The downside would be, though, that if there's less people now, they don't actually need to print as much money to have the assets go up way higher and not hit a hyperinflationary state, because there's just less people buying everything. There's less demand from everything. So they have a much more controlled version of who's buying what, where, when, and why. Now, you might not think, we lost, I think rough estimates say we lost around 15 million people due to disability. And we've kind of gone over some of this data before. So I'm gonna jump around a few topics here because I'm gonna make this a really long episode today. So thank you guys all. Number one thing I want to point out is I believe we're just about to break out, very similar to what happened to gold here. As soon as we got to the final stages of the backup of this cup and handle, we just went berserkers. And I think that's where we're at now. Giant cup and handle, and we're about to go berserkers, basically, which is a great thing. Very positive for the markets, and it's going to happen no matter who gets into office because they're irrelevant. The printing press must go on. It's like the show must go on. They have no other option. Now, if you could make some argument that maybe even Trump buys Bitcoin, and again, Trump would be the greatest bull market in history, Kamala would still be a bull market, but just in a route we wouldn't want, because more of that money is going to go to the liberal, Stanford Internet Observatory, where we track everything you do and kick you off the internet for shit you should be saying, right? Malinformation, I believe is what they call it. Information that's actually true, but just not good for the government for you to be talking about, which is pretty fucking ridiculous. Anyways, okay, so the point of this, I wanted to actually go over and look at some Fed data. Because the other important part to remember is that we have the Federal Reserve meetings in November. So the next FOMC meetings here are actually the 6th and the 7th. So yeah, but we're going to have a lot of volatility, not just because of the election, but because the Federal Reserve meeting minutes come out in the direct days after. So whether the election actually gets called today, and we know whether we know today who the actual winner is, which I believe it should be Trump, just based off the data and the amount of people, the polls, everywhere I go, Trump is clearly winning. I mean, you have 44 million views on the Joe Rogan podcast, but only 1 million views for Kamala on the Shay Shay podcast. Like, Cat Williams got 44 million views on the Shay Shay podcast. So why Kamala only get 1 mil? It don't make no goddamn sense. It don't make no sense. Okay, so the Fed has meetings on the 6th and 7th, which is going to add even more volatility to our market cycle here. So the FOMC meetings and the deciding on the interest rates, that's about to take place. The other thing that I thought was really interesting too, and this is what I was talking about just briefly, was the Fred meeting disability data. So you guys are going to go through me as I do my own research here. Population with a disability, 16 ages and over. Now this is fucking horrendous. So for those of you that don't know much about math, the United States disability has gradually been increasing from approximately 2010 until 2020. And over the course of 2010 to 2020, you had an increase from 26 million people. Yeah, because this is thousands of persons. So 26 million people up to 30 million people. But for some reason, disability dropped in 2020, most likely because those of the people who were infirmed and in some way likely to die from something simple actually died in February, from whether it was being locked at home, not getting enough care, so many things, the stress of all the media nonsense. Disability actually dropped. But then it took the largest increase it's ever taken and nearly doubled. Went from 28 million people to 34 million people. Disability increased at such a drastic rate, this would be equivalent to fucking aliens showing up tomorrow. This is a huge rate of change, and it shouldn't have, there's no way we should have been witnessing from June of 2020 to October 2024, like a 14 million person increase with a disability. So there's some pretty staggering data here, and this was across the board. So in the private newsletter, I've made the conjecture that these big rates of change, both in the mortality rates, the disability rates, the drop off of population, is going to massively change the way I thought hyperinflation would come into play. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know that I've been talking about hyperinflation as being one of the key elements of what would likely drive the market into these kind of realms of obscurity. So we've been talking about, let's go back over here. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just gonna switch back over. So the federal funds rate, let's take a look here, federal funds rate. So on the 6th and 7th, we're gonna have probably a drop of the federal fund rates again too, kind of regardless. We dropped from 5, and we're probably just gonna keep dropping basis points every few months. The reason being is, if let's look at the nominal inflation rates, because this is where the big story I think starts to tell itself a little bit better. I've talked about this a few times. Where's the CPI data? Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I've hit it over here. Population M2SL. Oh no, where did I delete it? Maybe. I might have deleted it by accident. Okay, here we go. US inflation rate from the labor statistics. Okay, this is the chart that I wanted. Let's get rid of our oscillators because we don't need them for this one. Okay, so I've talked about the likelihood of us whipsawing back and forth into a highly inflationary and then back extremely quickly into a highly deflationary environment. In a deflationary environment where you have less people buying stuff, the ability to print more money is like the only option you have left. And it could lead to hyperinflation a few years down the road, and I think it's going to, but we're going to notice it in a market melt up. I don't think we're going to have a market breakdown like anyone has ever imagined. I think the markets are going to melt up because the only valuable things in the United States are its assets. It's not its dollar anymore. Now, if the government cuts its spending with Trump and they get back into a better fiscal relationship with themselves, and not spending more money on servicing the debt than they are any of the other options that they have, then maybe you could see like a rebound where you don't just drop into hyperinflation. But currently, we're about to drop into deflation. So this is the last like 100 years of data, basically, from 1901 on the far left of the screen, all the way to where we are over here, 2024. So as you can see, in the early 1901 to 1902, you had this massive whipsaw of massive inflation upwards of 20%, deflation upwards of negative 14%, and then bang, and then into this is the 1930s crash here. Look at the deflationary nature of the 1930s, massively deflationary. And I think that's what we're about to see now. And the only thing that they have is to print money and allocate it properly to overcome that situation. Now, it's not something the United States couldn't overcome, but it leads me to believe again that no matter who gets voted in, this is going to be the only answer they have. We're going to head into deflation, and they're going to start printing a ton of capital. Now, the person who allocates that capital most effectively will make the best bull market, but that capital allocated ineffectively will create a horrendous dystopian totalitarian state that will make the United States one of the worst possible places you could ever fucking want to live. So between the disability data, the mortality watch stuff that we've been going through, the reason why I think this election is so important is because both presidential candidates are going to create a bull market because there's no other choice due to the effects of deflation that are going to start to push in really heavily over the next few years. So bull market no matter what, But the bull market under Trump could be a fucking phenomenal thing, because properly allocated capital and a cutting of government overreach and spend would equal the greatest bull market in history. And that's something we should all be hoping for, because the human species is capable of so much innovation and so many cool damn things. You know, we've basically cut it off at the knees. But the United States is one of the last vestige points where you could have this happen properly if you allow free speech, keep the Second Amendment, you make some additions maybe to say you can't ever ban people on the internet for talking about shit, because misinformation is just free speech. And if you want to make parody or make jokes or say lies about shit, you should be allowed to do that. Because we need a population who's able to discern the difference between a lie and a truth, because they're constantly exposed to it. Not, oh, we just have to believe the truth because someone told us what that is. It's a huge, huge mistake I think a lot of people would make. Yeah, you can just only tell the truth because the scientists know best. They don't fucking know best. They're wrong all the goddamn time about so many fucking things. I've been right more often than most scientists, because scientists are their reputation is at stake, and they've been taught something and they believe something, which if they now have to change their mind, it ruins their whole reputation because they were fucking wrong. I don't care if I'm wrong. I just want to find out if I'm wrong, because it's the most valuable truth-seeking mechanism for myself. So hyper important, I think, to where we're at. But right now, I think a lot of people are starting to recognize what I just went over. This is going to be a bull market no matter what. This is going to be a bull market no matter what, because both government subsidiaries are going to do the same thing. They're going to print money. They're going to print more money. It's the only option they have. Which one prints more money could come up with a much better outcome. That's true. If the Democrats get elected, oh my God, it's going to be so bad. It's going to be so bad. It'll still be a bull market, but it'll be a horrible place to live. You just won't want to live there. If the Republicans get elected, it'll be an even bigger bull market, and it might be somewhere you want to live. Tio would also even be like, wait a second, no income tax, you know, like no capital, just reduce capital gains tax. You're going to chop off big parts of the government so people can actually come and try to build stuff there. I would move to the United States. I would move to the United States if they did those things. You would massively increase the talent pool while keeping out immigration who shouldn't be there, who doesn't bring properly allocated capital. And that's either mental, physical, and a whole number of ways to do it. We should, any country that thinks, hey, we should vet the people who come in here to be the most intelligent, the most capable, the most valuable, regardless of what skin color they are, and invite them all over and not tax them, you're going to have one of the most beautiful things in history. So my fingers are crossed for that. I know it's like a kind of a far-fetched dream, but goddamn, if that happens, it'll be so fucking cool. So there we are. We're ripping into a bull market, I think, quite quickly. Yeah, so here we are. This is Bitcoin on the 4-hour. We've been following this nice reaccumulation range. It looks to me like we've already had a spring and our secondary tests, and right now we're just testing the top of that. Right now, too, the other thing I wanted to quickly go over kind of in favor of Bitcoin was taking a look at this. I talked about this chart previously in some of our discussions. Here we have the BTC liquidation heat map, which is nice to see, but we've effectively wiped out like $30 billion of shorts to the downside here for Bitcoin, which is phenomenal. There's very little holding us back from the upside now. I mean, there's a few shorts that people took out to protect around the $73,000 area, but I think that's pretty fleeting. I don't think those will last. We'll probably cut through that pretty damn quickly. So the fact that we've cut through the most important parts of the downside here is a reflection. And there's almost no more leverage long positions down at the bottom either. So there's only a few billion. Most of those have been closed out and took their profit. There's not a whole lot of reason to magnetize to the downside. There's only reason to magnetize to the upside now. So big changes have taken place there. The other one was just the Bitcoin capital cycle flows, that we are still on a decline of the short-term holders and an increase of the long-term holders. Once the red really starts to spike, you could tell we're kind of at a top. We had actually, this is a nice example. So I'll zoom in using both of these ones here. As you can see here previously, let's close this out. These big spikes usually represent portions of the top. So we did have a portion of our top here, And we're getting a lot of selling at this point now as well, but we're not peaking out, and that's important. And we're actually seeing a steady decrease in the short-term holders as well, becoming long-term holders. So I think that these two are important to keep in mind. That the fact that we're still seeing a decrease in the short-term holders is important. Everything is looking positive. Oh, and my face is kind of in the way here, isn't it? So I'll have to move it up to the top. Yeah, there we go. So as you can see on the bottom right here, just a subtle spike, nothing too big, but I think this is actually going to diminish here. It's going to come back down, and then we're going to see a large spike here in the next few months as we rip into new all-time highs for Bitcoin. It just makes the most sense, categorically speaking. Like I think it's pretty easy to decipher at this point in time. So there's a few really strong indications for other reasons that we've got a nice bull market here still ahead of us too. Taking a look at your guys' questions really quickly. Does the chart not make more sense in log scale? Log is good too if you're looking at really long-term data. So I'm not sure which chart you're talking about. So you'd have to be more specific. I looked at a bunch of charts there. I don't think we'll see a huge dip if Trump loses. Most of the supply is chewed up already. It's not going to make a huge difference. We'll see more volatility around the 6th and 7th, I think, than we will today from these markets. Again, I think that the Federal Reserve data will actually end up being more volatile than the election itself, which is kind of a fascinating thing to think about. It's just the most likely scenario here is that the change in governing structure doesn't affect the underlying bull market because the demand sequence for Bitcoin is pretty much already set. There's not much more they can do. It'll be a little volatile, but again, I think that will be largely more around the 6th and the 7th when we get the economic Fed data, because that massively affects the S&P 500, and people are usually culling or adding risk at that point in time based off that data, because many people are sentiment based instead of data based. So they wait for sentiments from the Federal Reserve to make decisions, which is fair enough. But the demand signatures here to me all say the bull market is about to roar, and you're about to enjoy like the sweetest part of the last chunk here, where Bitcoin just basically goes ballistic with very little effort. So here, this nice cup and handle, again, very similar to gold. I think we just go basically straight on up and out from here with very little time to slow down or stop. So I think it's going to make a big difference with very little effort too, which is always nice to see. That the rate of change here will be basically, it's just going to be very quick. Most of the times when we get to this point of the market, it just happens very, very fast. So hopefully you're all buckled in and ready to go. Let's see, I saw a few more questions, so let me rip back to the screen over here. Break news, Kamala voted for Trump. Yeah, probably. Crypto Carpenter, where did you get that voting map? Everything I see says something different. So the voting map would actually change quite frequently. My understanding is that it's going to shift every few hours or every like 20 minutes. So here we go back to the voting map. Trump is in the win, 23-3 here. Harris is just slowly, lots of votes, but very few electoral states taken over. So it's going to be an interesting race here. Yeah, Donald Trump's winning though, for sure, at this moment. But that's how it was in 2022. What country do you live in at the moment? I'm a permanent resident of Costa Rica. That's my home base, but I'm now in Indonesia because I love Asia. Although Costa Rica and Indonesia have like the exact same plants, so it's quite a nice place for me. So the other thing I think that's important here too is Well, again, just to keep a close eye on this, it's probably going to take all night. Like I could sit here for hours and hours, I'm sure, watching this data kind of update. But at the moment, Trump's winning 54 to 44.8%, and men are voting more and more too. I was actually scrolling through Twitter here. If you guys don't follow me on X or Twitter, please do. I always post stuff here. I really like what Musk has done, so I really only use X and YouTube. I've deleted Instagram. I only use Facebook to talk to mom and pops, basically. Like, I love X, and YouTube is just, I speak a bit more candidly here about what I actually think and do a lot of self-censoring, because otherwise I've already been shadow banned from using YouTube to begin with. So I have to be somewhat cautious with what I say on the tubers, but I'm pretty open and quite vocal on X there too. So if you want, give me a old follow on X, just at Arcane Bear, because I always post the videos there, just in case for some reason YouTube actually decides to ban me. But there we go. Everything's looking good. Data's looking nice. Let's see, and Bitcoin's just pumping along here right now, $70,900. Yeah, we're already back to the top of the box, you know? People are bullish. Now that people are waking up to see Donald Trump winning, the market's like reacting very quickly. There's no hesitation. Across the board, it's actually interesting to think about that money managers and marketers are more bullish because Trump is winning. I think that's a good sign of what the future will hold here. People with a large majority of money will often say one thing and do something else too. They don't want you to know how they actually feel. Like Mark Cuban. You know, Mark Cuban probably rolling up to the polls today being like, well, maybe I'll pick Trump because the market clearly likes it. That guy's such a fucking dingbat. He's clearly an example of someone who got lucky, not because he's smart, but just because he got lucky. Like, if you make enough money once, like, you're set. You don't need to try anymore. You can just play the game and get it right enough, because it's fucking mathematics. Like, you can get 1 out of every 10 right and be a fucking billionaire, because that's all you need. That's like the truth of the equity markets, generally speaking. So he got lucky once, and he's been riding that like he's intelligent for a really long time. He's clearly a moron. What is your ethnicity? That's an interesting one. You know, my grandma was really into family trees, and I'm largely Slavic and German and French, but because my family was French, there was actually, and they were early immigrants to Canada, there's a native in there as well, because why would you not want to, you know, you're rolling up to a foreign country, you're definitely going to want to hook up with one of the locals, maybe. So apparently one of my French grandfathers thought that was a good idea. So I have a little bit of native Canadian in my bloodstream there as well. Side point. Yeah. So for the voting map, I just went to Google and typed it in here. This is aggregated data from Google. Although it's not the most trustworthy, it still does have Trump winning at the moment. Let's take a look at the other assets. Here we go. Aptos. So yeah, this is really important. We see some big screaming market moves here, coming out of the box for a few things. Let's take a look. Yeah, look at Aptos, how beautiful this was too. Just at least on the 15-minute. We had stayed under the 15-minute simple moving averages. Basically, as soon as we got out of them here, we've broken to the upside. I think we're going to see a big move here starting for pretty much all the assets. Some of them are going to perform better. Aptos, Sui. I've got a few at the top of my list. Fetch, Solana, Ton, Near, Render. Those are all at the top of my list for like abstract plays within the AI world. But going just through the general market now at the moment, you see decent movement kind of across the board here, 2 to 5% in almost everything. But yeah, if you notice at the top of the charts, the ones that are moving the most are the ones that I've kind of pinned here. Aptos is really strong. Sui's been ridiculously strong. So if we see a continuation of those market cycle movements, Solana here is another great example. Actually, let's take a look at Solana. And we'll take a look at fetch too. Yes, you could make a pretty easy argument that this is a giant cup and handle for Solana as well. And it's a two different sequences of a movement. So we've noticed this before in the past, that often the bottom of the range has one portion. This actually looked like an inverse head and shoulders to me, or triple bottom, depending on how you want to look at it. Beautiful reaccumulation. This is why we went long in October. And now here, this I could make an argument, this is a giant cup and handle, basically, very similar to what we've seen in Bitcoin and gold. So there's a reason to believe that Solana here is going to do quite well. I also think that the data we went over previously around the Chinese markets printing 10 trillion is super important. I don't think it's the US markets that are driving a lot of this market cycle hype. I think it's the Chinese market accumulating assets through abstract entries. It makes the most sense to me. And again, here you have this kind of interesting giant head and shoulders here too. So there's a few different ways to think, oh my God, this is actually very bullish. And so for Solana, we're gonna go at least to 250 in this next move before we get some type of LPS action. And we could go even higher. Again, we haven't seen the full-on bull market yet. We've just seen the early stages of it. And even for the early stages, that was like 6 to 10x for Solana. So huge moves for Solana, even as it was. So the fact that we see these multiple assets that appear to be in reaccumulation at the top of the trading range, SUI as well, if we go to the multiple day range here, you can see, well, first off, what sent us long in the first place was a falling wedge, followed by a breakout and a reaccumulation within the box, which is always my favorite place to enter. And then this huge move up outside of the box, turned into distribution, from distribution, fell down the range multiple times, formed what appeared to be a really small inverse head and shoulders at this box, and then sent us ripping for 180%. But notice again, we're on the top of this range here. So once we break, there's not a whole lot holding us back anymore. We're basically in a blue sky discovery zone for a few different assets, SUI, Aptos, Solana. So we're on the cusp of blue sky for a while, probably. That would be my guess. That we're not too far away from blue sky for Solana either, and same with Aptos. I'm going to sell all of my Ethereum at the end of this market cycle. I fucking hate Vitalik. Anyone who thinks vaccines and masks are a good idea, I will just no longer invest with founders who are stupid ass morons. That's what I learned with FTX. When he brought Bill Clinton on stage, I thought to myself, I don't like this. This seems like such a bad idea. And I should have listened to that intuition because it was right. So now anytime there's a philosophical agreement, I'm just going to wait till the end of the market cycle and get rid of literally every single chunk of that asset that we own, because Vitalik and his stupid ass Dunning-Kruger mindset, who, because he knows a little bit about code, made a bunch of money, thinks he knows anything about anything else, and he's clearly an idiot because he doesn't eat healthy. Like, bro, you don't even take care of yourself. Why the fuck do you think you know anything about anything other than the little coding world that you built yourself in? So from now on, when I see those things, I just go, fuck off, I'm leaving. So we'll be selling all of our Ethereum at this one. It's one of the least excited performers. It's still going to do well. I mean, we'll probably from here at least jump up to the 5,200, but I don't expect maybe anything more than that. It's not super exciting. Which is kind of sad, I think, for Ethereum. It could have done much better, but when your founders are idiots, that's what you get. That's what you get. Let's take a look. One of you guys asked about Caspa and dropped a little super chat there. So YouTube says, congratulations on a super chat. So I'll take a look here for us. Caspa on MEXC, crypto, let's go with the whole crypto cap. Yeah, it's hard to say. We look like we're at the potential bottom here for Caspa of some kind, but you've just had so much monumental growth for Caspa in the last few months. You're talking about 3,000% effectively. Once you have a 3,000% growth, it's easier to think to the downside. for a time being, and I would wait for much more clear accumulation first. I don't see accumulation here. This looks more like distribution to me. So similarly, TON is one that I suspect is still in distribution. So here's TON. Notice how it's just stayed below this falling deprecation line so far. Until we break out of that and make some movement to the upside, I think it's important not to get too crazy there. Just because with any asset, just as same as if we were looking at Caspa, this looks like all downside to me. I don't see anything that says accumulation yet. So I think even if you have a run up here, it's likely just going to lead to further distribution because there's so much more room for downside here. Like you could come all the way down to 0.03 cents before you saw some type of accumulation. And the bull market won't make a difference in that. We saw this with Link previously too. It just doesn't make as much of a difference as you'd think. Once it goes into distribution, that's it. People are taking profits for a long time, moving over and rolling over into other assets. So I would be weary of a Caspa position, although it might come back up. Let's say, what is that? You might get a 50% run here until you break above the simple moving averages here. It looks like it's going to stay bearish probably for a while, just because it's so high from like 2023. Just like, let's see here. Here's where I made my positions in October 2023 here, the same. It was up 5 to 6x. Yeah, so I would expect until we see something more clear in an accumulation range, I wouldn't be too stoked about fetch. The same way with TON, I'm not super stoked about. I think it's got a lot of great potential, but this just looks like more distribution to me. This looks like the top of the market. So until we see that distribution effectively change, it's not worth playing with because there's other assets that are in the finality, like Aptos, for instance. Take a look at Aptos here, which could very well be at the finish of huge accumulation buckets. And once you get these tests, they often just go kind of straight up and out for quite some time. But Sui seems to be one of the most, has the most strength, which is still impressive. Can you take a look at Avalanche? Yeah, Avalanche's got a big bucket of 2. Avalanche appeared to me that it was starting to break out of its secondary tests. Again, it's come all the way back down to the bottom of the box. There's clearly a bunch of, Avalanche has a lot of great stuff going for it, but they're doing such a bad job on controlling their distributions and everyone's just been taking massive amounts of profits. But even here on the downside, I actually think that we're going to get a breakout because we're basically retesting this falling range here. But yeah, to me, there's just too much extra supply in here to be super excited. So we have a big position, but it just is not as exciting as we would have hoped because of the way they've dealt with their supply controls, basically. So we're in a falling range. Again, it looks to me like we've completed our spring, we've completed our test, and we're just about to go into the SOS phase, probably around $33, and then continue higher. But after this one too, Avalanche will probably do better next cycle if they get their shit together, because they do have good technology, but their distribution cycle is just, this is one of the parts you have to remember is that if you have a large amount of supply that keeps coming into the market at all the wrong times, people that are really excited about the technology won't want to use it because you just don't have the same amount of room for upside. Now, Solana's been able to keep us in check because a lot of this stuff is still locked in FTX's holdings. No one's been able to touch it. So a lot of the people that have the hundreds of millions of dollars in Solana can't touch it yet because they haven't been distributed that from the purchases of the FTX bankruptcy. But once they do, later on in the bull market, this shit's gonna drop like a hot fucking rock. I'll be shorting Solana as it starts to peak out because there's just so much extra supply that's been locked up because of the bankruptcy. And Avalanche has been releasing the supply on kind of a set term based off their nodes and early investors. So it's just been getting killed basically, which doesn't make it fun because even if you have great technology, the price is a huge benefactor of like a marketing agent. So that's been largely to the downside for Avalanche, sadly, as well. But that's okay. I think we'll probably get a 250% run out of it from here, if not a little bit higher. Yeah, I probably will sell all of my Avalanche and wait for them to get better, or for more of the distribution of the supply to have come down to a halt, because clearly it's just everyone that gets, there's too much supply coming in, and it's just massively reducing their ability to stand out within the market. So that's always been kind of a downside. Let's jump over and see how our electoral results are going. Woo! The Trump jump to 55.5% in the polls here. Still leading the way with 23, what appears to be 23 electoral votes. Yeah. So for the U.S. Senate here on the right side, oh yeah, so we're still waiting for a bunch of electoral votes to come in, basically around 8 p.m., 10 p.m. Hey Google, what time is it EST in the United States?
It's 7:52 p.m. on Tuesday in Eastern Time.
Ooh, so we're gonna get a bunch new data come in the next 8 minutes, basically. So I'll keep on track for that one, because 8 minutes will fly by. Awesome. Sorry, just got a message coming in from my mama bear. Let me check this. Awesome. Okay. Megan says the distribution phase on Avalanche is over. Yeah, generally, I think we're near the bottom of this particular reaccumulate, because we've come down right down to the previous accumulation range, which is pretty heavy. Clearly, we had a nice run up of like 5 or 6x, but just all of this distribution the last little while has been super heavy. She's saying that we've maybe finished much of the distribution from the vesting schedules as is, which I'd have to take a look at, but for now we'll trust you and go, cool, that's great. Which means if that was the case, the next run up in Avalanche could be monumental, because really what's been holding us down is just this large distribution cycle that keeps taking place from their previous venture investors, and the node distribution too. So kind of difficult to deal with that, and it just is horrible for the marketing when the price is always so depressed. Less people are excited about it, they want to put their money somewhere else, so even though the technology is great, they kind of walk away and focus on something that has a bit better marketing structure for their supply and demand issues. So, but yeah, SUI looks like it's about to rip here. Just for fun, let's take a look at the daily oscillators. Ooh, the daily oscillators have actually turned down, but could be flipping. Let's look at, oh, that's the 2-day. Let's look at the daily. Yeah, okay, so the daily oscillators have actually turned up. Yeah, this looks bullish as shit to me, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I think there's every reason to be strong into the bullish feeling here. Yeah, and Bitcoin too. Bitcoin's now back at 71.4 thousand. It's right at the top of its range. If Donald Trump gets more votes here, we're going to be at 79,000 probably by the end of the day. And I think we're going to see we'll probably see a big drop actually too, where you'll get some big volatility like this. Maybe we rev up to 77,000, we come back down to 72,000, and then we're just up and out for a month or two afterwards. So it'll be pretty noticeable. But I think we're going to get a little backup phase here too. There's usually a bit more of an LPS and backup phase in these final moments. But yeah, the fact that it's all the way back to the testing at the top of this is bullish as shit. Megan says, don't worry, I'm being honest. You can check I'm being honest. No, I believe you. I'm just going to believe you. I have no reason to think you're lying for any particular reason. So we're just going to believe you and leave it at that. I don't need to check right now. Thanks for the data, Megan. Yeah, look at that. 7.5 million votes for Trump, 5.9 million votes for Kamala. Should have... Need like a bunch of royalty-free music to listen to, so we can like rock out for a few minutes. Yeah, all the charts are looking good. Let's see. Oh, it's Wednesday. Oh, the S&P 500 is closed, so that won't really give us any useful data. But yeah, we're seeing lots of strength in the rest of the market. That's for sure. Yeah, whew, that's exciting. Looks like our justification around the market cycle here is coming to fruition. It's always good. I love this last little bit. It's where you have the highest amount of confidence and the least amount of time you have to wait for the market to actually do something, which is the most fun place to be. Because you don't got to wait around staring at charts every day being like, oh, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. It's like, no, it's going to go up now. Like, it's for sure. We problem solved. And you only miss out on, like, what is this? Even with our daily range here, like 20 to 30%. But the move to the upside here is probably going to be like almost 100%, close to 100%. Yeah, close to around 130, I would guess, would be the first like kind of SOS range where I'd be looking for potential distribution. Maybe we go higher, but let's aim at 130, 140. Glasswalker says, always fascinating how the news cycle matches the charts. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, they just came into perfect alignment there. The very finality of this reaccumulation range right at the date of the fucking elections. It's beautiful. Chart art, effectively. I don't know. Can someone explain to me why Harris has only won 3 seats? What is that? These are the electoral seats, right? So Trump has won Indiana, Kentucky. Oh, winning. Okay. So I think that he's won these already because of the electoral votes that go into it. Yeah. So 4 electoral votes. Okay, that's how that works. If I'm not mistaken. So he got there's 11 electoral votes, and Trump won with 64%. Now it's only reporting 25% of that, but that's enough that Donald Trump, I think, cleared that state anyways. Like, there's no catching up for Kamala there in these ones that are all red. Whereas in Florida, they're at 80% reporting, but there's 30% of the electoral votes, and it's a much closer race in Florida. So vote count 5 million, vote count 4 million for Kamala. So we've got some more battleground time here, but I think some of that data is going to start to roll in the next 10 or 15 minutes, basically. Rick says, hey, Tio fellow, CA here. Why do you not see the value of Link? No, it's not. I don't see the value of Link. That's not what I meant. It was more about the way the distribution and supply cycle had taken place. It's just not primed to go super bullish because of how much extra supply there was sitting over, and how high many of the holders were already. So we saw, in fact, I'll go back to Link just so I can share that sentiment. It has less to do with Link itself, more to do with the chart of Link, not Link itself. So we go back to Link here. If you notice, we had a beautiful, like 500 days of accumulation, which sent us bullish, which was great for a nice 1.5x. But the fact that we've returned all the way back down to the bottom of the box. Now, the reason why I think this is important is because when we go out to the much longer data sequence, we don't even have all of that data here. You know, from March 19, 2019, we're up 1,900%. There's just so much more room for downside still. When you're up thousands of percent in just 2 years, there's a lot more room for downside than you'd think. Now, you could make an argument that, hey, Tio, isn't this a giant cup and handle? I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to saying that this is a giant cup and handle. It's not against the grain. So Link is probably easily going to come back to $20. But it's a long ways away from breaking into, like, look how much distributional wick there is here up between the $20 to $30 area. It's going to have a hard time getting through that at the moment. Whereas other assets are already there and about to take off, right? So Bitcoin, for instance, is already at the top of its range and above the previous all-time high. It's going to have an easier time going higher. And that's an important part to remember about the cycles. Just a bit easier, I think, to chart based off this type of mentality. The supply and demand lanes are a little clearer, for me at least now, to follow those. Like with SUI, I've taken a position in SUI because it's just already at the top of the box. It's retested its previous highs, and it's looking bullish as all the oscillators turn over. It's got more use than Ethereum, a whole bunch of things. So I've built a position on SUI the last 2 or 3 weeks here because it looked like it was just going to be so strong. And so far I've been right about that. That position's up 36%. So it's doing great on my personal stuff. But anyways, the point of this idea was that because Link has so much supply and is up so high in such a previously short period of time, it's better to, other assets will probably perform better in the short term. Even though Link might be amazing, the supply and demand characteristics just say it's going to be weaker. What's nice is I've gotten a little bit more away from leading with fundamentals based off the technical of the application, like how good is the technology, and I'm leaning more into how good is the fundamentals on the technical side of the chart, because the supply and demand characteristics are way more important than the use case necessarily, because that shows you who's interested and how much of it they're actually interested in. One of you asked me to take a look at render. Yeah, again, render here since that early breakout of October 2023 had a nice 6 to 7x. It's clearly fallen through distribution. Yeah, it fell right out of the range for distribution here pretty easily. We could be at the bottom of a reaccumulation range, but again, you just have better assets that are performing better. So why do you want to chase something? It's better to, I've found in the past, it's better to chase things that already have the strength and are at the top of their supply range, because they're going to have the most amount of room for upside, even though they're up more already. So it looks like render's at the bottom of its reaccumulation range, but there's just other areas that are, other tokens that are doing better already because of the way they're positioned against their supply ranges. So I prefer to lean more into that. But render will do well, I think. But again, there's other assets that are going to move faster. So I've just positioned myself in a bit more there instead. Years and years of practice though, and getting used to that kind of thought process has been, I'm not always a fast learner. Whew, there we go. We had a bunch more votes come in at the top of the hour. Trump ahead at 53.4%. Trump took Oklahoma, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina. So many of the states here on the right are obviously closing because the polls are closing at 10 p.m. it looks like. So we've got a long ways to go before we know some of the data on the West Coast there. 10 p.m. EST. Wait, hey Google, what time is 10 p.m. EST?
11 a.m. Wednesday in Caribok and Kellogg.
Okay, so 11 a.m. So I'd have to stream for 2 more hours to get the rest of the data. I don't think I have that in me. I mean, I kind of want to, because it's just such a historic moment. It'd be fun to kind of track along and drink my coffee and share with you guys. Let's see. That should send a bunch more data into the markets here. We should see more upside. As Trump continues to win these kind of intermediary polls, I think we should see more and more data come in for the upside here, which is quite positive. Let's go back to the charts, take a look. Yeah, Fetch here is another good one. This to me, Fetch looks like a really nice inverse head and shoulders. Here's the head. Here's the shoulder. We're about to break out. I think we're just going to go pretty much up to $2 here for Fetch. So Fetch and Render are kind of in the same position, but Fetch to me looks like it's just about to break out this previous falling test range and then go almost straight up to the upside here. So yeah, we've got a few more. Texas is a big one. I'm surprised Texas is such a close race. This is probably because so many Californians moved to Texas during COVID because they hated the Democratic Party. Now they're still voting Democratic because they're just brainwashed morons. Or rather, let me say something a bit nicer. They're just brainwashed. They're not morons. I mean, brainwashing is extremely effective. Psychological warfare is extremely effective. I mean, I shouldn't blame the people who were attacked by psychological warfare, because psychological warfare is effective. That's why they do it. It's not necessarily the person's fault. It's the psychological warfare's fault. So I'm going to stop blaming the people. I don't think it's necessarily the individual people's fault. It's the fact that psychological warfare is so effective. And that just sounds better, I think, at the end of the day, doesn't it? Like, I feel nicer saying that. Like, it's not their fault, they're idiots. It's the psychological warfare's weapons capabilities to shoot a hole right through their brain, which it's not really their fault. You know, if we didn't have the psychological warfare going on, it might not be the case. You'd have a different outcome. So Trump currently at 95 electoral votes, though. That's pretty big. I mean, the popular vote is pretty close, but the electoral vote range is not at the moment. It's a much bigger lead. Interesting to see. Yeah, and here we go. We can see, yeah, the market's just pumping. Look at SUI since this previous breakout. So I made a bunch of entries around this $1.86 range because this falling range, and it's already up 13% in less than 2 days. You know, just huge moves. Same thing with Aptos. Aptos looks really good. Fetch looks really good. Actually, everything looks bullish. I guess that's the main point here is everything looks super bullish. You know, I told you guys about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm going gig along here, and so far I'm very happy with that decision. I think we're just going to get a continuation. There's nothing here that says bearish to me, no matter who wins the election, no matter who wins the votes. We're going to see volatility in the coming days. So if you haven't positioned yourself, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 more short-term opportunities to position yourself very well. And then after that, we're going to be in a screaming bull market once all of the volatility from the elections and the Federal Reserve meeting minutes kind of dissipates. So very exciting stuff. Sorry, everyone. One sec. Just have to leave a message. Oh, okay, there we go. A little board meeting update. Okay, there we go. Data keeps rolling in here. It's looking good. I mean, it's looking good for Trump actually winning. This could be huge if Trump wins. Oh, I can't believe I'm excited about that. I can't believe I'm excited about Trump potentially winning. It's ridiculous to me. First off, I think democracy's mostly disappeared anyways, but if there is a hope for the United States, it's under Trump, the one guy who didn't start a war in like the last 25 fucking years of the United States, you know? Like that's a huge thing. How does he not get more credit for that? Like it's so important, and everyone's just like, doop-doo, let's just vote for the people that love Dick Cheney. Like what the fuck is wrong with the USA? It's so crazy to me. Oh, anyways, what do I know about politics? I'm just a person who likes to eat mushrooms and watch the stars. Fucking ridiculous. Well, that's pretty wonderful. Yeah, wow, here we go. Big upside here. Yeah, I think we're going to get I think the bull market's just going to only continue upwards and outwards here for the next little while. It's going to be a beautiful, glorious thing. Let's jump in. Yeah, so here we're looking at SUI. Let's clean the chart up, get rid of the oscillators. Let's go into area charts. We can get rid of the bear claw for fun. Yeah, nice, beautiful falling wedge accumulation range. SOS back up, bang. I think this is just going to continue. I mean, I think we're going to see a few LPS markers here where we come back down and break out again, but I think we're just going to go upwards and outwards for so many assets across the board here. Fetch too, right at the bottom of this falling range, part of its reaccumulation into its right shoulder. Like this to me just looks so fucking chart-wise perfect, you know? Yeah, let's go with this. Yeah, if we zoom in here on the 2 hour to get a better of a clear data. Yeah, look at that. Same thing with Fetch that we just saw with SUI, although if I go to the 6 hour, it'll be a bit more clinical about the process. Yeah, we're just about to see the SOS phase, probably get a little bit of a backup, and then we're going straight up here for for fetch as well. So lots of opportunity in the market in the next few days to bring in some real big capital. So enjoy it. Yeah, everything's gonna go really well. I think this is enough early data for me to come to the conclusion. I'd posted this in the private bear group already. It's only bullish. The reason being is because both government candidates or surrogates have no choice but to print. How well they manage the government will lead to a better bull market. And I think under Trump, we would have like a roaring 20s style innovation phase. And under Kamala Harris, we would have a pretty shitty time. We would still have a bull market, but a lot of that extra capital would be allocated to absolute garbage like bombs for Ukraine. Ukraine. Who cares? It has nothing to do with the United States. Just let Russia take it. It just doesn't matter. You know, they've got their own shit to deal with. Why are the United States meddling around in other people's goddamn business? Just focus on your own country. Like, it's so crazy that who cares? Just ignore it. Turn off your goddamn TVs and focus on your own sewage, your own plumbing, your own fucking infrastructure, your own education. Do better at home before you worry about everybody else. What does Jordan Peterson say? Jordan Peterson says, clean up your goddamn room, United States, and then maybe you can help other people. But for now, Kamala's need to fucking focus on cleaning her own goddamn room. That bitch probably can't clean a dish. If you ask her to do something, I'm not okay. It's okay. Don't need to denigrate people. She's a human being. Maybe she's an alien. I don't know. She's definitely not a super smart human being. Goddamn. It's good. Life is good, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're enjoying that. 95 to 35 for Trump. And the market is reacting super positively to that data already. So there you have it. I'm going to log off for the rest of the day. And we'll keep it at that. Steve with the Arcane Bear. Thank you guys so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying and you've positioned yourselves well for the rest of this market cycle, because we're about to rip fucking roar, it looks like. You got maybe 1 or 2 more days of volatility through the 6th and the 7th here with the Federal Reserve meeting minutes, but that's about it. That's the last time to dance, I think, again. I know it said the last time chance to dance like the last week, but it looks like we were right. So enjoy.